They thought it was just a garden, rows of roses, magnolias, and vegetables swaying gently in the Louisiana heat. But beneath the soil lay secrets, overseers who vanished, betrayers who never returned, and at the center of it all was one man, Samuel Carter. In 1931, on a plantation in Louisiana, the garden became a graveyard, and the whispers began about the place that locals would come to call the Garden of Silent Graves. Samuel Carter was born into bondage. By 1931, slavery had been abolished for nearly 70 years, but for men like him, black men in the Deep South, the chains had simply changed form. Sharecropping, debt peonage, and violent suppression kept many African Americans trapped in systems that were slavery by another name. The plantation where Samuel worked looked on the surface like a place of beauty, sprawling fields of cotton and cane, live oaks stretching wide with their moss, and a great house that stood like a monument to old wealth. But for the workers, it was a prison. Samuel's days began before dawn, when the air was heavy with dew and the whip-poor will called from the trees. He rose tired, his hands already blistered from yesterday's labor, his back bent from years of toil. Overseers barked orders, guns rested easy in their hands, and every row he hoed, every basket he carried, was not for himself, but for a system designed to keep him down. Life was brutal. Mistakes were met with lashes, mouths kept shut by fear. The overseer, a man named Caldwell, ruled with cruelty. He was quick with his fists, quicker with his whip. He seemed to take pleasure in breaking men down, in reminding them they were property, even though the law no longer used that word. But Samuel was different, quiet, watchful, and inside him something stirred. An anger deep as the river, patient and slow-moving, but impossible to contain forever. Day after day, Samuel endured the fields. His shirt clung to his back with sweat, mosquitoes bit at his skin, and the cane leaves cut like knives against his arms. Overseers laughed as they sat in the shade, watching men bend and break under the sun. Nights brought no relief. Workers returned to shacks with thin walls, no comfort, little food. And in the dark, Samuel listened. He listened to the groans of the wounded, the sobs of mothers who had lost children to disease and hunger, the quiet prayers whispered for deliverance. Caldwell and the other overseers ruled with fear, and fear ruled the enslaved. To resist was to risk death, but to endure was to die slowly, piece by piece. Samuel's breaking point came one evening when Caldwell beat an elderly man, too old to keep pace in the fields. The old man's body crumpled in the dirt as laughter rang out. That night, Samuel sat in the corner of his shack, staring at his hands. Hands that worked, hands that bled, hands that could bury. It was then that the thought came, cold and certain. The garden. Samuel had long been assigned to tend the plantation's gardens. It was supposed to be a gentleman's garden, filled with flowers to impress visitors, vegetables to fill the master's table. Samuel knew its soil, its rows, its corners. He knew where the earth was soft and where the shadows lingered, and he knew it could hide things. The plan took shape slowly, with the patience of a man who had nothing left to lose. The first overseer vanished on a night thick with cicadas. Samuel worked late, his hoe striking the earth in steady rhythm, as if nothing were amiss. But in the shadows, he waited. The overseer, drunk from the house, came stumbling into the yard, muttering curses. Samuel's heart pounded like a drum. He acted quickly, silently. By the time the night grew still again, the man was gone. The garden absorbed its first secret. Samuel dug deep into the soil he knew so well, his muscles straining, the sweat of fear mixing with the sweat of labor. He laid the overseer's body down among the roots, covering it as carefully as he would a seed. By morning, the rows looked untouched. Flowers swayed gently. Tomatoes ripened in the sun, and beneath them lay Caldwell's man, swallowed by silence. Rumors spread when the overseer failed to appear. Some whispered he had fled debts, others that he had been taken by bandits. No one suspected the quiet gardener with calloused hands and steady eyes. But Samuel knew, and Samuel waited. The pattern continued. Months stretched on and more overseers disappeared. Always at night, always near the garden. Samuel never boasted, never betrayed a hint of what he had done. By day, he was the same, hoe in hand, sweat on his brow, silent in his work. By night, he was the reaper, turning soil not for crops, but for graves. Whispers began among the workers. They noticed how the garden grew thicker, greener, as if fed by more than just rain and sunlight. They spoke of spirits haunting the rows, of voices in the night, of a man who had made a pact with the earth. The overseers grew fearful. They carried guns more often, barked their orders more harshly. Yet, when night came, fear still crept in. Some refused to patrol near the garden. Others left the plantation altogether. And still Samuel worked, planting seeds above the dead, watching flowers bloom where cruelty had once walked. The climax came when Caldwell himself vanished. Caldwell, the cruelest of them all, the man who laughed as he lashed, who called Samuel Mule more often than by his name. For months, Samuel had bided his time. For months, he had watched. And one night, when Caldwell staggered into the garden to relieve himself after too much drink, Samuel struck. The struggle was brief, violent, silent except for the sound of fists and breath. Caldwell's body fell among the rows he had once mocked Samuel for tending, and with grim resolve, Samuel opened the earth once more. That night, the cicadas sang louder than ever. Samuel's shovel struck the dirt, the sound dull, heavy, echoing in the night air. He dug until his arms ached, until blisters tore open on his palms. He dug until the hole was wide enough, deep enough. Then he laid Caldwell down, covering him with soil until the garden looked whole again. By dawn, roses swayed in the breeze, their petals brushing softly against one another. Beneath them lay the overseer who had once ruled with cruelty. The aftermath was chaos. When Caldwell vanished, panic spread across the plantation. The master raged, sending riders into town, posting notices, demanding answers. Some said Caldwell had been killed by bandits. Others whispered that the workers had turned on him, but no proof could be found. Overseers refused to linger at night. Some quit altogether. Fear ran deeper than the Mississippi. For the workers, the fear was different. They whispered among themselves about Samuel, though no one dared name him. They spoke instead of the garden, of the silent rows that seemed to swallow men whole. They warned their children never to wander too far, never to linger near the roses after dark. Samuel himself remained as quiet as ever. He tended the plants, tilled the soil, and kept his head bowed. No one confronted him. No one dared. But the legend grew. They began to call it the Garden of Silent Graves, a place where cruelty went to die, a place where the soil itself avenged the oppressed. Some said they could still hear the cries of the overseers at night, muffled by earth. Others swore the flowers grew redder, richer, fed by blood instead of water. Whether out of fear or reverence, no one disturbed Samuel. And as the years passed, the story spread beyond the plantation, whispered in towns, told in hushed voices by firelight. History rarely records men like Samuel Carter. The official ledgers and newspapers say nothing of the garden, nothing of the disappearances. To the world, these overseers simply vanished. To the master, they were failures, drunks, men undone by vice. But in the folk memory, Samuel lived on. He became a shadow figure, a name invoked in warnings and in prayers. For the oppressed, he was a kind of hero, proof that even in the darkest times, vengeance was possible. For the powerful, he was a ghost story, a reminder that cruelty could return in kind. The garden itself eventually grew wild. When the plantation fell into ruin, the roses overtook the fences, the vegetables withered into weeds. Travelers who passed the land spoke of an unease, a heaviness in the air, as if the earth remembered. And perhaps it did. This was Samuel Carter's story, the man who turned a plantation's garden into a graveyard, who buried cruelty beneath the soil, who created what became known as the Garden of Silent Graves. His story forces us to ask, how many others lived and resisted in ways history refused to write down? How many legends hide the truth of survival and vengeance? And what does it mean that the land itself became the witness, holding secrets too dangerous to speak? If you want more hidden stories of resistance and survival, watch this playlist here, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the stories history tried to erase.